Hi, and welcome back to the C86 podcast. Today I want to talk about something that quietly sits underneath so many of the big business issues in UK hospitality, but somehow still doesn't get the attention it deserves, and that's business rates. It's not the most exciting topic in the world, I get it. It's not as fun as talking about new openings, big food trends, famous chefs, tech, or even the chaos of a Saturday night service. But if you want to understand why pubs are closing, why restaurants are constantly under pressure, why hotels are having to make brutal decisions, and why the high street feels like it's slowly losing its heartbeat, you cannot ignore business rates. Because business rates are one of those costs that do not care about your reality. They do not care if it's been a slow month. They don't care if the weather has been awful and footfall has dropped. They do not care if your kitchen has just lost a chef, or your rota is a mess, or even your supplier has let you down. They do not care if energy prices are up, if wages are up, if national insurance has changed, if customers are tightening their spend, or if the street outside your venue has turned into a ghost town. Business rates arrive on schedule, they sit there like a fixed weight on your back, and they make it harder to breathe. And right now, going into 2026, the conversation around business rates has shifted from frustration to something much more serious. For a lot of hospitality businesses, it feels like the difference between surviving and literally shutting the doors for good. So in this episode, I want to break it down properly. Where business rates came from, what they originally designed to use, why they hit hospitality so hard, and why it's become such a political topic, what the current rises mean in practical terms, how it is affecting operators on the ground, what changes might happen, and most importantly, what operators can actually do about it right now. This is not a rant, it's not a doom and gloom episode. It's a clarity episode because once you understand what is going on, you can make better decisions and you can also talk about it with more confidence. And this matters because business rates are not just a line on a spreadsheet, they shape what kind of hospitality industry we end up with. So let's start with the basics. Business rates are a tax paid on non-domestic property. That means if you run a pub, a restaurant, a cafe, a hotel, a bar, a takeaway, a shop, an office, or a warehouse, anything like that, you are likely to pay business rates. And it's based on something called the rateable value of your property. The rateable value is meant to reflect the annual rental value of that property at a certain point in time. It's not based on what you personally pay in rent today, it's a valuation done by the valuation office agency, and it's supposed to represent what the property could rent for on the open market. Then that value is multiplied by a number called the multiplier, which is set by the government, and that gives you your business rates bill. There are reliefs, discounts and transitional arrangements, but the core idea is very simple. You are tax based on the building you occupy. And that is the first reason business rates feel so brutal in hospitality. Because hospitality is not a sector where profit is guaranteed. It's not like a software company where you can scale up without much extra cost. Hospitality is high cost and low margin. Even the best operators in the world can have a week where everything goes wrong and the numbers look really, really ugly. A restaurant can be packed and still not make much money. A pub can be busy and still fragile. A hotel can be full and still be struggling if costs are rising faster than rates. Business rates don't care about any of that. They're not linked to profit, they're not linked to turnover, they do not flex with your cash flow, they're simply a bill attached to your property. So, why do we have them? Well, the basic purpose of business rates is to help fund local government. It's part of how councils raise money for services, things like infrastructure, waste collection, street maintenance and social care. It's always been seen as a stable tax base because property does not move. You can't hide a pub, you can't pretend a building does not exist. It's easy to measure, easy to build, and hard to avoid. From a government perspective, it's reliable money. But the problem is that the world that created this system is not the world we live in now. When business rates were designed and modernised, the high street was a very different place. Retail was stronger, footfall patterns were different, online shopping was not dominant, and hospitality was not competing with delivery platforms and digital convenience in the same way. And there was not the same gap between physical businesses and online giants. The system did not anticipate a future where you could build a massive business without having a meaningful footprint on the high street. And that's exactly why the fairness argument has become so central. Because hospitality and retail are taxed heavily for being physical and visible. Meanwhile, many online businesses can generate huge revenue with fewer customer-facing premises. That creates a situation where the businesses that create local jobs and community are often carrying a heavier burden than the businesses that are extracting spending away from towns and cities. Now, to understand how we got here, it helps to look at history in plain English. Business rates evolved from older local property taxes. For a long time, both households and businesses paid local rates. Then the poll tax era happened, which was politically explosive, and council tax replaced domestic rates, but non-domestic rates stayed. Then in 1990, business rates became nationalised in England and Wales. That was a key moment because it meant the multiplier that was set rather than being set by local councils. So the government became much more involved in the structure and the increases. Now, over the years, we've had periodic revaluations. In theory, revaluations are meant to keep things fair. If property values rise in one area, the rateable value should reflect that. If property values fall, the rateable value should also be adjusted downwards. But in practice, revaluations often feel like punishment for success. If your area becomes popular, your rent goes up, your rateable value goes up, and then your business rate goes up, and suddenly you are paying more taxes because your postcode has become desirable. Hospitality gets caught in a particularly painful loop here, because hospitality often makes an area desirable. Great pubs, great restaurants, cafes, hotels, they bring people in. They create a buzz and they create footfall. They improve the experience of a neighbourhood. Then the area becomes more attractive. Landlords push rents up, property values rise, rateable values rise, rates bills rise, and the very businesses that help make the area successful start to get priced out. It's one of the most frustrating cycles in UK hospitality. So now let's talk about why hospitality feels this harder than other sectors. Hospitality is property intensive. A restaurant needs a kitchen, seating, toilet, storage, extraction, and often outdoor space. A pub needs a bar, perhaps a cellar, seating, and usually a decent footprint. A hotel is literally property as the product. You cannot run these businesses without success, and that space obviously comes with a cost. Then hospitality has its own unique cost structure. You have wages which have been rising and will continue to rise. You have energy which has been volatile. You've got food and drink inflation. You have repairs, maintenance, insurance, compliance, licensing, equipment, and all the background costs that customers never see. Now, many businesses also have debt from the pandemic era, whether that is bounce-back loans, rent arrears, or simply cash flow damage that can never fully recover. So business rates land on top of all that. And because they're fixed and non-negotiable in the short term, they become one of the most feared bills in the building. It's one thing to have a cost that rises when you sell more, that is manageable. It's another thing to have a cost that stays high even when you sell less. That is what creates the feeling of being squeezed. If your sales drop 10%, your business rates still do not drop 10%, it stays exactly the same, which means your profit can drop by far more than 10%. In some cases, it goes from small profit to loss overnight. And that is why business rates can be the thing that turns a decent business into a failing one. Now, one of the biggest arguments around business rates is the high street versus online debate. Hospitality and retail have been saying for years that business rates put physical businesses at a disadvantage compared to online giants. The logic is simple. A business that operates mostly online might have a warehouse or a few distribution hubs and can generate huge turnover. A business that operates on the high street is paying heavily for a customer-facing space, often in a prime location, with a huge rateable value. So the businesses that provide local employment and community are taxed heavier for their presence. Meanwhile, businesses that pull spending away from local areas can carry a lighter property tax burden. Governments know this is an issue. They talk about reform, they talk about levelling the playing field, they talk about supporting high streets. But fixing business rates is politically difficult because business rates fund local government. If you reduce them significantly, you have to replace that revenue. And replacing that revenue means either raising other taxes, cutting services, or shifting the burden somewhere else. So what happens is we get short-term reliefs, discounts, transitional support, and targeted schemes. They help, but they do not solve the underlying problem. And that's why the industry keeps coming back to the same point. We need reforms, not patches. Now, why does 2026 feel particularly intense? Because it's not the business rates alone, it's the business rates on top of everything else. It's rates plus wage inflation, rates plus national insurance changes, rates plus energy, rates plus food inflation, rates plus higher borrowing costs, rates plus consumer caution. And that combination is what makes the current moment feel so fragile. The sector is already stretched. Many businesses are operating with little margin for error. So when business rates rise, it's not just an inconvenience, it can be a tipping point. That is why we are seeing warnings about closures. That is why we are seeing headlines suggesting multiple venues could close every day. And that's why the language from trade bodies is becoming more urgent. Because when the money comes in the front door, it's not enough to offset the costs going out the back. Something breaks. And when a hospitality venue closes, it's not just a business that disappears, it's jobs, it's suppliers losing revenue, it's a local drop in footfall. It's a community losing a meeting place. It's a street losing energy. It's often long-term vacancy that becomes harder and harder to fix. A closed pub rarely reopens as a pub. A restaurant often closes and becomes an empty unit for months or years. And that is the reality. And this is where politics entered the conversation. Business rates are political because they sit right at the intersection of government revenue, the future of the high street, and cultural identity. Pubs are a perfect example. Every government wants to say it supports pubs. Nobody wants to say the government that is blamed for killing pubs, but sympathy is simply not enough. Pubs do not need warm words, they need structural change. Hospitality is also politically complicated because it's huge but fragmented. There are major pub groups and hotel groups, but there are also tens of thousands of independents, and independents often do not have the time or resources to lobby or campaign. They're busy running the business. So the industry relies heavily on trade bodies, associations and collective pressure, and that pressure builds slowly. Now let me bring this down to ground level with a few realistic examples. Imagine a neighbourhood restaurant. It's been there for years. It's not a flashy place. It has regulars. It's busy on the weekends. It doesn't trade during the week. It employs a team of maybe 15 people. The owner's not getting rich. They're not making a living. They're proud of the business. Then the area becomes more popular. New apartments go up. Footfall increases. The street gets busier. Suddenly the landlord knows the unit is worth more. Rent increases. Then the next valuation comes around and the rateable values increases too. Then the rates bill increases. Now the restaurant has higher rent and higher rates, but customers are already feeling squeezed. They cannot keep raising prices without losing demand, so the owner tries to absorb it. They cut staff hours, they reduce menu options, they stop opening for lunch, they reduce investment in the venue, they delay repairs, they stop doing the little extras that made the experience so special previously. Then a slow winter hits, then a couple of staff leave, then a fridge breaks, then energy spikes again, then suddenly the restaurant is one bad month away from closing. And the business rates bill still sits there like a constant reminder that even if you do everything right, the system can still break you. Now imagine the same story with a pub. Pubs are already dealing with shifts in drinking culture. Many pubs have become food-led, which means higher complexity and higher costs. They need more staff, more kitchen equipment, more compliance, more waste, more risk. Their margin on food is not huge. Their margin on beer can be good, but volume is not what it used to be in many areas, and the rates bill still arrives. So a pub can feel like it's running just to stand still. Hotels have their own version of this because hotels are large property, often in high value areas, and even small changes in rateable value can create huge increases in the bill. So when people say business rates are threatening the sector, they're not exaggerating. They're describing how a fixed property tax can become unmanageable in a low margin industry. Now the big question, what can operators actually do? First, you need to know your rateable value. You'd be surprised how many operators do not. It's not enough just to pay the bill and hope for the best. You need to know exactly what you're being assessed on and why. Second, you need to understand what reliefs you can qualify for. There are schemes that can make a meaningful difference, but they're not always automatic, and sometimes you need to apply or check eligibility. Third, if you believe your rateable value is wrong, you should challenge it. It can become time-consuming, but it's also well worth it, especially if your property has issues that affect rental value, like restrictions, layout problems, poor condition, or reducing trading capacity. Fourth, you need to build rates into your forecasting properly. Too many businesses treat rates as a background cost, but when they rise hard. And if you're not modelling to it, you're not managing it. Fifth, you need to focus on resilience, because if you cannot control business rates directly, you have to control what you can. That means procurement, labour efficiency, menu engineering, supplier negotiation, maintenance planning, and tighter operations without killing the guest experience. This is also where technology can genuinely help. It can reduce the time and cost of finding the right suppliers, services and pricing, and you can protect margin. This is one of the reasons platforms like Say86 exist, because operators are constantly trying to keep costs under control while still delivering a great product. Anything that makes procurement faster, clearer and more competitive can give operators a little breathing room. Sixth, and this matters, you need to talk about it. Business rates reform will not happen quietly. It will happen when the pressure becomes unavoidable. That means supporting industry voices, sharing real stories and pushing for change locally and nationally. So where does this go next? I think business rates reform is inevitable. I just think it will be slow. Governments will keep offering short-term support. They will offer reliefs and tweaks and targeted packages. But unless the system fundamentally gets fairer between physical businesses and digital giants, the high street will continue to weaken. And just to bring it back to what we're doing day to day as well, because it's easy to talk about business rates like it's this massive national issue that nobody can influence. But the truth is operators still have to find ways to stay afloat in the meantime. So what are we trying to do with Say86? We're trying to make it easier for operators to find better supply costs, better support, better fit services without spending hours chasing people. emailing around, or constantly renegotiating from scratch. It's about giving operators quicker access to the right suppliers at the right time and helping suppliers connect with venues that genuinely need what they offer. And we're also looking at ways to go beyond just products and suppliers, because pressures on hospitality is not only food and drink, it's the whole operating environment. And that's why we're exploring support partners too, including rates brokers and specialists who can help operators check their position, understand where they're paying, and potentially challenge or improve it where possible. Again, it is not a magic fix, but it helps ease the pressure even slightly. It's worth doing. Because right now, business rates are not just a headline or a political debate, they're a real monthly stress for thousands of venues. And while the long-term solution has come from government reform, in the short term, the industry needs practical support, better tools, and better connections to help operators keep going. So if you're listening to this and you're an operator, I would genuinely love to hear how business rates are impacting you, what you're seeing, what you're doing to manage it, and what kind of support would actually make a difference. And if you're a supplier or service provider who helps venues reduce costs, improve operations, or navigate through things like this, we should definitely talk to. So listen, thanks for listening, and I'll catch up with you on the next episode.